It is Norsca week. We got some big stuff coming out this week. We got the Regiments of Renown on the 10th. We got Norsca on the 10th. We got Ulfric on the 10th. We've got Throg on the 10th. Everything's coming on the 10th. Happy birthday, Creative Assembly. I hope you enjoy your 30th as much as I will not 3 months from now. Or 4 months from now. But today, guys, I wanted to go over some of the hype that we've been getting with Norsca with the Famir, the Mammoths, Ulfric, Throg. But today I really want to go over the Skin Wolves. You know, there's two real big races that we've been seeing a lot of in the Famir and the Skin Wolves. There's not a lot that people know about them. You know, Famir were really big in the first and second editions of Warhammer. I think they're barely mentioned, like scant mentionings in the second edition, but more so in Warhammer RPG. And we'll talk about Famir in the second video on this. It's going to be a two-part series. Today we'll be sticking mainly with the Skin Wolves, which really just sounds like a very terrible name for a penis. But Skin Wolves, though, they have a really loose mention in the White Dwarf list that was released a very long time ago for the Norsca roster. This roster was originally released for our eyes in a White Dwarf, and that, for those of you who don't know what a White Dwarf is, I keep saying that term. White Dwarf was a monthly, then a weekly, then a monthly publication by Games Workshop, and it would cover pretty much the entire hobby as a whole, the Warhammer series, the 40k series. But they did a lot of lore excerpts into these. In the true to form way that magazines are typically done. They had the Index Astartes, where it would cover every single chapter of the Space Marines in an episodic fashion, or they would cover certain things in the Warhammer world, or deliver certain lists in the Warhammer world of things that had been retired and the such. Like Chaos Dwarves were originally a army book, and then they were released episodically through the White Dwarves as the editions were updated and so on and so forth. And they really kind of lost love throughout the ages and eventually completely fell off. And that's how they kind of did things with Norsca. Norsca never got its official army book. It had hey, if we were to release an army of Norsca, here's what it would look like army list. And people used that for a little bit. I think it was, oh man, I want to say it was like third edition that was around, third or fourth edition. And those of you that have the list, because I know some of you have sent it to me, let me know what edition or what year actually that White Dwarf was from, and we can peg down what year it was. But both of them, Famir and Skin Wolves, were very big in Warhammer RPG. Oh, and before I get too far ahead of myself, I know some of you will notice this, and I'm actually going to show pictures of it. The Skin Wolves had a Forge World model set, and they were beautiful models with the skin like draping over their muzzles and everything, like slothing through their claws. Like, it just looks so fucking cool. I'm definitely going to showcase me a little bit down the way in the video. But they were both very big in Warhammer RPG, and Warhammer RPG is going to have its another 4th edition run coming out very soon. But a lot of what some of the other like lore YouTube guys know about, and myself included, is from the 2nd edition Warhammer RPG book. A lot of these creatures are covered, the things that are not really mainstream in the bigger tabletop community, that they come from those kind of, just like when you play Dungeons and Dragons, they have like a monster compendium. They have the same thing for Warhammer RPG. So again, this video will cover mainly the Skin Wolves and the Were creatures, and in the next video that we're going to be releasing on Wednesday, we'll do the Famir. So we'll kind of take a look at the Skin Wolves here, and the Skin Wolves, if you guys haven't gotten it, kind of obvious. They're your traditional lycanthropes, and lycanthropy, that's what I meant to say, is basically the act of changing into, or at least the illness or whatever kind of curse or whatever you want to fix to, of being a werewolf. You know, if you watched that movie that always escapes me every time I want to bring it up, with oh god, what's her name? The girl with blue eyes, whatever. They're all called lycans, which is short for lycanthropes. If you played any of the Elder Scrolls series, you had werewolves in that series. Or if you played Vampire the Masquerade, there were werewolves in that. And werewolves and vampires always typically tend to have kind of a synonymous bloodline right next to, not bloodline, but at least relationship. And we'll get into a little bit in that in this video, not a whole ton, but The first lycanthropes in the Warhammer world were really called the Children of Ulric, and it talks about how Ulric, when the world was young, basically walked the world, and as he was walking the world, he met this very fair Norse maiden. I think her name was like Bridget or something, like a Brigit or something, Bridgeit or something, and they fell in love, and he planted within her the seed, and this seed became a child, and the child was considered half man, half wolf, and Ulric was the wolf god of not just the Norse, but of men as a whole, and we'll cover that when we talk about the gods of the human world, or I'm sorry, of the men of Warhammer, like the Empire mainly being the men when I'm talking about that, because Bretonnia has its own set, Stalia and Tilia have their own set, and so on and so forth. But Ulric, being the wolf, this wolf god, bears this child out of Bridget here, being half man, half wolf, which is considered the first of the werekin, and the werekin, of course, skin wolves being one of them. And there's a bunch of different names for, we say Norskins as kind of a catch-all, but there's Norskins, there's Kurgans, there's Hungs. All these are various kind of barbarian marauder tribes of the north, and all of them have really their own skin wolves in some way or another, and we'll cover those various tribes in another video here. But these guys are not your typical lycanthropes. They're not necessarily bitten or anything like that. They don't look at a full moon and howl and grow fur over their face. It could be the result of a curse, the result of a mutation, a ritual, or maybe just overall chaos taint. It's not the typical trope that we've seen in a lot of other things in our society when it comes to werewolves. And they really don't have any kind of self-awareness. Think Hugh Jackman, huge jacked man in Van Helsing. He's half insane, this ravenous beast, and he's like the coolest interpretation of werewolves I've ever seen in anything. Like when he pops up his head and those pointed little black werewolf ears, I'm like, oh, that is terrifying. Hugh Jackman with black werewolf ears on as himself, not as a werewolf, would be terrifying. Couldn't imagine him playing a werewolf. Holy crap! But that's kind of the same werewolf you should envision once he's kind of given in all the way to the curse and he's kind of insane and just looking for blood. That's the skin wolf, and they rip their way through their human skin, and there's just chunks of it hanging off. They get their namesake from this, and that's why you see even in the video that we saw of the skin wolves, you see these kind of tan pieces of their body and their fur and stuff like that, and it kind of makes for a very different look. But that's actually pieces of their own skin that are hung around them, draped around their neck as it pushed its way through its own head. Its bone structure kind of changing into that of a werewolf, and lopping little strands of it hanging down over its thighs and everything like that. Those are, again, scraps of its own skin. And a lot of people have actually kind of made the mention of, okay, when we get the Norse, well, since Norsca will be in the base game, which already has a Blood for the Blood God, quote unquote, DLC, will that be a more gruesome looking model? Will he have just more blood coming off of him, more to this than actual just kind of what looks to be like gray skin of the sort? So I'm curious to see once we see Norsca on the 10th how that'll look. But they really kind of rally around one another like a general pack of wolves would. They're not necessarily controlled very conventionally, in at least in the lore, and obviously in the way that they're going to be portrayed in Total War Warhammer is going to be very, generic point click attack. But they're again not subject to the traditional werewolf tropes with those full moons and everything. So they're kind of, the lore talks about being bound by Caden's magic, and Caden was this necromancer that actually started the Strigos Empire. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the origins of the bloodlines of the vampire counts, and one of them being the Strigoi Ghoul King we've heard of. Oran was the primogenitor of that bloodline, and Morkane, which we've talked about as well in that video. So maybe we'll see a little bit of, I don't want to say similarity, but maybe some sort of relationship between the Strigoi. What's the Strigoi skin wolf relations? Maybe we'll see something of that in Total War Warhammer when it comes out. I'm not saying that the skin wolves are going to be in the vampire count roster at all, but hopefully they'll kind of give us some sort of subtle nod to that, because the Strigoi are all about having these kind of like not necessarily were creatures, but crypt horrors and crypt ghouls are monstrosities built from necromantic magic. And while Skinwolf isn't 100% that, it does kind of have that same reminiscent feel, that same kind of pang in the back of the tongue, at least. But again, that's kind of a side digression, but I want you guys to at least know who Caden was and how he was important with the Strigoi bloodline and with seemingly the Skinwolves. And that's purely lore-based, so I'm not sure if that's just going to be, oh, well, that's a throwaway thing from the lore, so we won't really go into that, or if they'll incorporate some sort of thing with that. Of course, I don't think they're going to crumble or anything. They're not undead. But, and going into that, after battle, these guys, these skin wolves, once they've really gorged themselves on the blood and meat and everything of their prey, they revert to their normal selves. They come back to being human. And, just like the wolf has to burst from the man now has to burst from the wolf carcass, more or less. They shrink back into their human form underneath this hulking wolf form. So that's a really amazing kind of imagery that paints. I don't think that I would love to see a total war where on the battlefield, when you're placing them for the first time, there's no Skinwolf. It's just a normal marauder, and you've got like a pack of 24 normal marauders, and then as soon as you press start battle, they explode, all their skin like ripping off, sloughing off the bones, landing on the ground around their neck, draping from their muzzles and everything as they stretch through their human skin, and what's left is the skin wolves as soon as you press start battle. And then as the battle ends, they just kind of collapse, and they rip through their own wolf carcasses as they come out. Of course, that's me wishful thinking. Of course, it's not going to happen, but just that imagery is really amazing, that they kind of go in and out of this battle as a skinwolf to a man, and then as a man to a skinwolf. And like I was saying, they don't have the kind of full moon transformation type action. They're not, man by day, werewolf by night. So they stay wolves until they become men again by gorging themselves on humans. But the real big question, though, is how do these guys kind of stack up against other comparable units, like Crypt Horror, for instance? I'm going to use them a lot for this, for what we're going to talk about here. We're going to bring up the actual, what's this thing called? The video from the Twitch where they did talk about the Skin Wolves here. And we've got the unit card now. We can kind of do a lot of cross-examining, right? So it's got a really larger unit size, so it puts them on par with demogryphs. It kind of puts them in the large, quote-unquote, cavalry, rather than, say, like your typical Blood Knights, or you're looking at your Grail Guardians, which are, humanoid cavalry. When you look at demogryph, they are not. Those are beasts that they're on. So them being 24, they kind of fit that role more so than your traditional cavalry role. And on top of it, though, they have lower armor, and they have half the armor of, say, just a Crypt Horror. At 15, Crypt Horrors have 30. Well, that's what half means. But keep in mind, this is the low armor variant we're looking at. We haven't seen the armored variant of the Skin Wolves. Maybe that armor will jump up to even to a 45, or something more in line with a heavy cav unit. And its speed is going to be a sacrifice as a result. They had mentioned, hey, with the armor increase is going to be a speed reduction. Which is a very important point that we're going to talk about after we talk about this next one here. But because their leadership is very high. And we've seen from traditional marauders and anything with the mention of Norsca that they've got just crap-ass leadership. So, it's needless to say, like, hey, are we going to get into another low leadership army like a Beastman or like a Greenskins or even like Empire at most times? But if you take a look at this, there's 60 leadership. That's a very high leadership. You look at a Crypt Horror, it's got 44. You look at an Armored Troll, it's got 38, which is, a Norsca, quote-unquote, themed Marauder-ish unit that we're going to see fleshed out with Ice Trolls. But we look at even Dragon Ogres have 70 leadership, so they just fall under Dragon Ogres with 60 leadership. So they're pretty high up there when it comes to leadership from a monstrous creature that is supposed to be a rampaging, half-insane, ravenous beast. So they're gonna be sticking around to fight, that's for sure. And we've brought up their speed, and their speed for a unit that is not on a horse But it'd be kind of really funny to think of them on a horse, right? It's a giant-ass fucking wolf on a really tiny, like, dwarf pony. But they're insanely fast. So they've got a 75 speed. That's the same speed as the entire Brett cavalry line. Minus, of course, their flyers and the mounted yeomen, which have a speed of 90, and the flyers all have, I think, 105. So they're bringing some legs to bear here. And again, this is the light armor variant. With the heavy armor variant, that speed might drop to a 60. We don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see, because that armored variant they were saying is going to be more of a perpetual combat unit. This unit is not going to fit that role. But it does have anti-large on its weapon strength. Its weapon strength being 60, which is 10 below a Cryptor, is still pretty high. But its actual anti-large value, if you hover over the little icon there, it'll show you an actual value affixed to the anti-large, so how much of its weapon strength damage is attributed to anti-large. And these guys have the highest value tied with the Demogryph halberds. And so it gives you an idea that these guys are going to be very strong competitive picks for every Norscan, I would say, because I would want one, if not two of these to harass back line. I mean, they're going to be a strong anti-cav unit with that anti-large aspect in there, or have them hunt down larger creatures. You know, maybe you're up against greenskins, or you're up against any unit that's bringing a lot of, say, giants or beastmen with a lot of their minotaurs or anything like that. That anti-large and the ability to get into that anti-large's face fast is going to be extremely beneficial for these skin wolves, because they've got frenzy, so you don't have to worry about them fucking fleeing anyway. And on top of it, with the regeneration, they're going to be true to lore, because we've talked about how they do regenerate a little bit here, them being lycanthropes and everything. But with that regeneration, the ability to kind of just get in there hard and fast, it's going to be awesome, especially for the heavy armored perpetual combat version with the regeneration. I mean, they're going to be able to really kind of stick it to the foe. And if you cycle charge these fast guys with regen, it's going to be cool too, because you'll be able to recoup some of the loss of the cycle. So I think the Skin Wolves are going to be an amazing troop choice for the Norskins. In general, I am really excited for the Norskins. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. The Famir are going to be amazing. The Mumakills, I mean mammoths, whatever the hell. And I'm really excited just to use Wulfric and Throg. So I'm really stoked on those guys. But some of the other were creatures that we've kind of heard from the lore and very, very, very kind of scant mentionings. Well, we've heard of Bjorg Bearstruck. We talked about him in the Dogs of War video, and he's a werebear. And if you've played Diablo 2, you understand how strong werebears are if you're doing ball runs. But I'm wondering if maybe we'll get some more units with Norsca. If we get werebears, and maybe they're more of like maybe a lower unit count, more monstrous infantry style unit than say these guys, which are more of a cav unit and less of an actual monstrous infantry unit. And I'm saying that in the sense that when I say monstrous infantry, I'm talking about a lower unit count, higher toughness unit. Like when you look at, say, Cryptors, you look at Armored Trolls, which I guess are kind of not what I've just mentioned, because Armored Trolls are just shit. But I would like to see like an 8 or 12 unit werebear formation that is huge, causes terror, and has just like crap speed, but huge weapon strength, and really high armor or something like that. I think that'd be a really cool unit. That's purely conjecture, because there's not a lot on werebears. Bjorg Bearstruck is like the only mention of werebears that I've seen in the lore. There's not much even in the RPG. They just talk about were creatures as a whole, and they go into skin wolves more in depth. And they even talk about, you know, the name were, you know, Ver is a Norscan name. It's even more so, it's got Germanic roots, so it kind of fits, right? But that's the Skin Wolves as a whole, guys. We're just touching on these guys today. We'll do the Famir later in the week. And just as a heads up, on the 10th, I'll be streaming the entire day, doing a giveaway of the Norsca DLC. So if you haven't pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 2, again, I will be giving away 1 or 2 copies, depending on how many viewers we get up to. We'll do it at random, or maybe even do like a subscriber cockfight to determine who gets the DLC itself. And then we'll be covering both Wulfric and Throg's campaigns. We'll do one part of the day as Wulfric, one part of the day as Throg. But thanks for watching here today, guys. I will put in the at the end screen the Norscan lore video, as well as the one for Dogs of War, so you guys can take a look at where like Bjorg Bearstruck's lore and a little bit more about what we've already talked about from Norskins and Wolfric and Throg basically in that video. But thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one and take care.